Hi, my name is Jacqueline Elisabeth, and I will be playing Miss VIDA Levering.
I'm Sarah Kezman, and I will be playing Lady John.
I'm Kayla Lees, and I will be Miss Jean Dunbarton.
Hi, I'm Seidman-Joria, and I am playing Jeffrey Stoner.
Hi, I'm Nunzio, and I will be playing the Honorable Richard Farnborough.
Hello, my name is Robert Howard, and I will be playing Lord John and Mr. Pilcher.
Hi, I'm Brett Jordan, and I'll be playing Mrs. Harriet and the Working Woman.
Hi, I'm Tricia Weiler Pisarra, and I'll be playing Mrs. Freddy in the crowd.
Hi, I'm Helen Cheng now, and I'll be playing Mrs. Ernestine Blunt, and I'll be in the crowd.
My name is Hamza, and I will be your butler for the evening.
My name is Emmanuel, Catalan, and I'll be Freddie TUNBRIDGE, and I'll be in the crowd.
I'm Stuart Fischer. I will be playing Member of Parliament, St. John GREATOREX, and the Chairman, Mr. Alan Trent.
$12 Sunday morning, end of June. As I'm going to answer the door from the garden by the lower French window, Lady John WYNNSTAY, flushed and flapping a garden hat, is fanning herself.
Has Miss Levering come down yet?
I haven't seen her, my lady.
I won't have her disturbed if she's resting. She certainly needs it.
Yes, my lady.
But I want her to know the moment she comes down that the new plans have arrived by the morning post.
Plans, my lady?
She'll understand. There they are. It's very important she should have them in time to look over before she goes. Is that Miss Levering?
No, my lady, Mr. Farnborough.
I'm afraid I'm scandalously early. It didn't take me nearly as long to motor over as Lord John said.
I'm afraid my husband has no authority on motoring, and he's not yet home from church.
It's the greatest luck finding you. I thought Miss Levering was the only person under this roof who was ever allowed to observe Sunday as a real day of rest.
If you've come to see Miss Levering...
Is she here? I give you my word I didn't know it.
Oh.
Does she come every weekend?
Whenever we can get her to. But we've only known her a couple of months.
And I have only known her for 3 weeks. Lady John, I've come to ask you to help me.
With Miss Levering? I can't do it.
No. Oh, that's no good. She only laughs.
She looks upon you as a boy.
Such rot! What do you think she said to me in London the other day?
That she was 4 years older than you?
Oh, I knew that. No, she said she knew she was all the charming things I'd been saying. But there was only one way to prove it, and that was to marry someone young enough to be her son. She'd noticed that was what the most attractive women did. And she named names.
You were too old.
The future husband, she said, was probably just entering Eton.
Just like her.
No. I wanted to see you about the secretaryship.
You didn't get it then?
No, it's the grief of my life.
Oh, if you don't get one, you'll get another.
But there is only one.
Only one vacancy.
Only one man I'd give my ears to work for.
I remember.
Do I always talk about Stoner? Well, it's a habit people have got into.
I forget. Do you know Mr. Stoner personally, or are you just dazzled from afar?
Oh, I know him. The trouble is, he doesn't know me. If he did, he'd realize he can't be sure of winning his election without my valuable services.
Jeffrey Stoner's re-election is always a foregone conclusion.
That the great man shares that opinion is precisely his weak point. His only one.
You think because the Liberals swept the country the last time?
How can we be sure any Conservative seat is safe after... Forgive me. I know you're not interested in politics, qua politics, but this concerns Jeffrey Stoner.
Do you count on my being interested in him like all the rest of my sex?
Lady John, I've heard the news.
What news?
That your little niece, the Scotch heiress, is going to become Mrs. Jeffrey Stoner.
Who told you that?
Please don't mind my knowing.
She had her heart set upon having a few days with just her family in the secret before the flood of congratulations breaks loose.
Oh, that's all right. I always hear things before other people.
Well, I must ask you to be good enough to be very circumspect. I wouldn't have my niece think that I...
Oh, of course not.
She will be here in an hour.
What? Today? The future Mrs. Stoner?
Yes, unfortunately we had one or two people already asked for the weekend.
And I go and invite myself to luncheon. Lady John, you can buy me off. I'll promise to remove myself in 5 minutes if you...
No, the penalty is that you shall stay and keep the others amused between church and luncheon, and so leave me free. Only remember...
Wild horses won't get a hint out of me. I only mention it to you because, since we've come back to live in this part of the world, you've been so awfully kind. I thought... I hoped maybe you'd put in a word for me.
With?
With your nephew that is to be. Though I'm not the slavish satellite people make out, you can't doubt that...
I don't doubt, but you know Mr. Stoner inspires a similar enthusiasm in so many young...
They haven't studied the situation as I have. They don't know what's at stake. They don't go to the whole duck field as I did just to hear his Friday speech.
But you were rewarded. Jean, my niece, wrote to me. It was glorious.
No, I was disappointed. He's too content just to criticize, just to make his delicate, pungent fun of the men who are grappling... very inadequately, of course, still grappling with the big questions. There's a carrying power. Some of Stoner's friends ought to point it out. There's a driving power in the poorest construction policy that makes the most brilliant criticism look barren.
Who told you that?
You think there's nothing in it because I say it. But now that he's coming into the family, Lord John... or somebody really ought to point out Stoner's overdoing his role of magnificent security.
I don't see even Lord John offering to instruct Mr. Stoner.
Believe me, that's just Stoner's danger. Nobody's saying a word. Everybody hoping he's on the point of adopting some definite line. Something strong and original that's going to fire the public imagination and bring the Tories back into power.
So he will.
Not if he disappoints meetings, goes calmly up to town, and leaves the fields to the Liberals.
When did he do anything like that?
Yesterday. And now that he's got this other preoccupation...
You mean...
Yes, your niece. The spoiled child of fortune, of course. She kept him from the meeting last week. Well, if that's the effect she's going to have, it's pretty serious.
You are?
I can assure you the election agent's more so. He's simply tearing his hair.
How do you know?
He told me so himself yesterday. I scraped acquaintance with the agent just to see if
It's not only here that you maneuver for the secretaryship.
You can never tell when your chance might come. That election chap's promised to keep me posted.
Aunt Ellen, I'm here.
My dear child.
I thought that was you running up the avenue. See, now they'll tell each other for 10 minutes that she's an hour earlier than we expected.
The Freddie Tunbridges said they were coming to you this week.
Yes, they're dawdling through the park with the church brigade.
Oh. I'll go and meet them.
That discreet young man will get on.
But how did you get here?
Oh, he motored me down.
Geoffrey Stoner? Why, where is he then?
He dropped me at the end of the avenue and went on to see a supporter about something.
You let him go off like that without a single...
Just tell me, my child. Is it all right?
My engagement? Yes, absolutely.
Geoffrey Stoner isn't going to be a little too old for you.
Bless me, am I such a chicken?
24 used to not be so young, but it's become so.
Yes, we don't grow up so quick, but on the other hand, we stay up longer.
You've got what's vulgarly called looks, my dear, and that will help to keep you up.
I know what Uncle John's thinking, but I'm not the only girl who's been left what's vulgarly called money.
Well, you're the only one of our immediate circle who's been left so beautifully much.
But remember, Geoffrey could... Well, everybody knows he could have married anyone in England.
I'm afraid everybody does know it, not excepting Mr. Stoner.
Well, how spoilt is the great man?
Not the least bit in the world, you'll see. He so wants to know my best beloved relations better. An orphan has so few belongings, she has to make the most of them.
Well, let us hope he'll approve of us on more intimate acquaintance.
He will. He's an angel. Why, he gets on with grandfather.
Does he? You mean to say Mr. Geoffrey Stoner isn't just a little bit superior about dissenters?
Not half as much as Uncle John and the rest of you. My grandfather's been ill again, you know, and rather difficult, bless him, but Geoffrey...
He must have the powers of persuasion to get that old Coventer to let you come in an abhorred motor car on Sunday, too.
Grandfather didn't know.
Didn't know?
I honestly meant to come by train. Geoffrey met me on the way to the station. We had the most glorious run. Oh, Aunt Ellen, we're so happy. I've so looked forward to having you to myself the whole day just to talk to you about...
very well.
Oh, you'd find it dreadfully dull to hear me talk about Geoffrey the whole blessed day.
No.
Well, till luncheon, my dear. You mustn't mind if Miss Levering wasn't only tired last night. She was ill.
I thought she looked very white.
Who's Miss... You don't mean to say there are other people here?
One or two. Your uncle's responsible for asking that old cynic, Sir John Greatorex, and I...
Mr. Greatorex? He's a radical, isn't he?
Jean, beginning to think in parties?
It's very natural now that she should.
I only meant it was odd he should be here, naturally, at my grandfather's.
Oh, it's all right, my child. Of course, we expect now that you'll begin to think like Geoffrey Stoner, and to feel like Geoffrey Stoner, and to talk like Geoffrey Stoner, and quite proper too.
Well, if I do think with my husband and feel with him, as of course I shall, it will surprise me if I ever find myself taking a 10th as well. You should have heard him at Dutfield. Oh, the Freddie Tunbridges! What? Aunt Lydia! Oh!
What a delightful surprise.
I'm so glad. How do you do, Mr. Freddy?
Very nice to see you too.
Oh, how do you do, Aunt?
Oh, my dear Jean, my darling child!
How do you do?
I wasn't surprised. I always prophesied.
Shh, please.
We haven't met since you were in short skirts. I'm Dick Farnborough.
Oh, I remember.
Not down yet, the elusive one.
Who's the elusive one?
Lady John's new friend.
Oh, Jean, I forgot you hadn't seen Miss Levering. Such a nice creature. Don't you think, Mrs. Freddy?
Of course I do. You're lucky to get her to come so often. She won't go to other people.
She knows she can rest here.
What does she do to tire her?
She's been helping my sister and me with a scheme of ours.
She certainly knows how to inveigle money out of men.
It would sound less equivocal, Lydia, if you added that the money is to build baths in our shelter for homeless women.
Homeless women?
Yes, in the most insanitary part of Soho.
Oh, really?
It doesn't sound quite in Miss Levering's line.
My dear boy, you know as little about what's in a woman's line as most men.
Oh, I see.
No. Philanthropy in a woman like Miss Levering is a form of restlessness. But she's a nice creature. All she needs is to get some nice fella to marry her.
Yes, a woman needs a balance wheel, and if only to keep her from flying back to town on a hot day like this.
Who's proposing anything so ridiculous?
The elusive one.
Not Miss Levering.
Yes, before luncheon.
She must be in London by this afternoon, she says.
What for in the name of...
Well, that I didn't ask her, but I think I'll just go up and see if she's changed her plans.
Oh, she must be made to. Such a nice creature. All she needs is some...
I protest. Good Lord. What are the women of this country coming to? I protest against Miss Levering being carried off to discuss anything so revolting. Bless my soul, what can a woman like you know about it?
Little enough. Good morning.
Oh, I should think so indeed.
Miss Levering, you aren't serious about going into town.
Oh, we were so very happy out there in the summer house, weren't we?
Ideally.
And to be held out to talk about public sanitation. Oh, forsooth. My God bless my soul. Do you realize that that's brains?
I'm dreadfully afraid it is.
And we in the act of discussing Italian literature. Perhaps you'll tell me that isn't a more savoury topic for a lady?
But for the tramp population less conducive to savouriness, don't you think, than baths?
No, I can't understand this morbid interest in vagrants. Now, you're too much. Leave it to others. Ugh.
What others?
Oh, sort of woman that smells of India rubber. Yeah, the typical English spinster. You know, Miss Levering, Italy's full of her. She never goes anywhere without a mackintosh and a collapsible bath. Rubber. When you look at her, it's borne in upon you that she doesn't only smell of rubber, she's rubber too.
Miss Levering, this is my niece, Miss Jean Dunbarton.
How do you do?
Miss, I'm sure that you agree with me.
About Miss Levering being too...
Well, for that sort of thing, I mean much, much too...
What a pity. You've exhausted the more eloquent adjectives.
Oh, but I haven't.
Well, you can't say to me as you did to Mrs. Freddy, you're too young or too happily married and too...
For what was Miss Freddy too happily married and all the rest?
Mr. Greatorex was repudiating the horrid rumour that Mrs. Freddy had been speaking in public about women's trade unions. Wasn't that what you said, Mrs. Harriet?
Yes, it isn't made up as carefully as your aunt's parties usually are. Here we've got Greatorex, who hates political women, And we've got in that mild and inoffensive-looking little lady.
You don't mean she's
You
really...
got me.
Oh, my dear child, he doesn't hate the charming wives and sweethearts who help to win seats.
Mr. GREATOREX objects only to the unsexed creatures who...
Yes, who want to act independently of men.
vote and do silly things of that sort.
Exactly.
It will be a long time before we hear any more of that nonsense.
Oh, you mean the rowdy scene in the House of Commons?
Yes, no decent woman will be able to say suffrage without blushing for another generation, thank heaven.
Oh, I understood that so little, I almost imagined people were more stirred up about it than they'd ever been before.
Not people like you.
How do you know?
God bless my soul.
Oh, she's saying that only to get a rise out of you.
Ah, oh, yes. Your frocks aren't serious enough.
I'm told it's an exploded notion that the suffrage women are all dowdy and dull.
Don't you believe it?
Well, of course, we know you've been an authority on the subject for... Let's see, how many years is it you've kept the house in roars whenever women's rights was mentioned?
No, as long as I've known anything about politics, there have been a few discontented old maids and hungry widows to petition.
That's really rather forbearing of you, Mr. GREATOREX. I'm afraid the number of the discontented and the hungry was 96,000 among the mill operatives alone. At least the paper said so, didn't they?
Well, don't ask me. That kind of woman doesn't interest me at all, I'm afraid. Only I am able to point out to the people who lose their heads and seem inclined to treat the phenomenon seriously that there's absolutely nothing new in it. There have been women in the last 40 years who haven't had anything more pressing to do than to petition Parliament.
And that's as far as they've gone.
It's as far as they'll ever get.
Mr. GREATOREX, let me see. Wasn't a deputation sent to you not long ago?
Yes.
Oh, yes, I remember. I thought at the time, in my modest way, it was nothing short of heroic of them to go asking audience of their arch-opponent.
It didn't come off.
Oh? I thought they insisted on bearding the lion in his den.
Of course, I wasn't going to be bothered with a lot of suffering.
You don't mean you refused to go out and face them?
I wouldn't have done it for the world, but a friend of mine went and had a look at them.
Well, did he get back alive?
Yes, and he advised me not to go. You're quite right, he said. Don't you think of bothering, he said. I've looked over it a lot, he said, and there isn't a weekender among them.
You remember Miss Freddy's friend who came to tea here in the winter? He was a member of Parliament too, quite a little young one. He said women would never be respected till they had the vote.
I remember telling him that he was too young to know what he was talking about.
Yes, I'm afraid you all sat on the poor gentleman.
Oh, there you are.
It was such fun. He was flat as a pancake when we'd done with him. Aunt Ellen told him with her most distinguished air she didn't want to be respected.
My dear Lady John.
Quite right. Awful idea to think you're respected.
Simply revolting.
Now, you frivolous people, go away. We've only got a few minutes to talk over the terms of the late Mr. Stoper's munificence before the carriage comes for Miss Levering.
Mr. Farnborough, did you know she had got that old whore to give Lady John £8,000 for a charity before he died?
Who got him to?
Miss Levering. He wouldn't do it for me, but she brought him round.
Yes, by Jove, I expect so.
Isn't she wonderful?
Nice creature. All she needs is...
Miss Levering, too wonderful to waste your time on the wrong people.
I shall waste less of my time after this.
And I'm relieved to hear it. I can't see you wheedling money for shelters and rot of that sort out of retired grocers.
You see, you call it rot. We couldn't have got £8,000 out of you.
I'm not so sure. If I gave you that much for your little projects, what would you give me?
Soper didn't ask that.
Soper? Oh, I should think not.
Soper? You two still talking soper? I'm flattered the old beggar to be. Now, listen here, GREATOREX. Did you hear what Mrs. Harriet said about him? So kind, so munificent, so vulgar. Poor soul. We couldn't know him in London, but we shall meet him in heaven.
Sit over there, my dear. You needn't stay, Jean. This won't interest you.
It's only an effort to meet the greatest evil in the world.
What do you call the greatest evil in the world?
The helplessness of women.
Jean, darling, I know you can think of nothing else but him. So just go and...
Indeed. I can think of everything better than I ever did before. He's lit up everything for me and made everything vivider, more significant.
Who has?
Oh, yes, I don't care about other things less, but 1,000 times more.
You are in love.
Oh, that's it. I congratulate you.
Well, this, you see, obviates the difficulty you raised.
Yes, quite.
But it's going to cost a great deal more.
It's worth it.
We'll have nothing left for the organ at St. Pilgrim's.
My dear Lydia, we're putting the organ aside.
We can't afford to put aside the elevating effect of music.
What we must make for first is the cheap and humanely conducting lodging house.
There are several of those already, but poor St. Pilgrim.
There are none for the poorest women.
No, even the excellent Soper was for multiplying Roughton houses. You can never get the men to realize you can't always get women.
It's the work least able to wait.
I don't agree with you, and I happen to have spent a great deal of my life in works of charity.
Ah, then you'll be interested in the girl I saw dying in a tramp ward a little while ago. Glad her cough was worse. Only she mustn't die before her father. 2 reasons. Nobody but her to keep the old man out of the workhouse, and father is so proud. If she died first, he would starve. Worst of all, he might hear what had happened up in London to his girl.
She didn't say, I suppose, how she happened to fall so low.
Yes. She had been in service. She lost the train back one Sunday night and was too terrified of her employer to dare ring him up after hours. The wrong person found her crying on the platform.
She should have gone to one of the friendly societies.
At 11 at night?
And there are the rescue leagues. I myself have been connected with one for 20 years.
20 years? Always arriving after the train's gone, after the girl and the wrong person have got to the journey's end.
Where is she now?
Never mind.
2 nights ago, she was waiting at a street corner in the rain.
Near a public house, I suppose.
Yes, a sort of public house. She was plainly dying. She was told she shouldn't be out in the rain. I mustn't go in yet, she said. That's what he gave me. And she began to cry. In her hand were 2 pennies silvered over to look like half-crowns.
I don't believe that story. It's just the sort of thing some sensation monger trumps up. Now, who tells you such?
Several credible people. I didn't believe them till last week. I saw for myself.
Saw? Where?
In a low lodging house not 100 yards from the church you want a new organ for.
How did you happen to be there?
I was on a pilgrimage.
A pilgrimage?
Into the underworld.
You went?
How could you?
I put on an old gown and a tawdry hat. Lady John, you'll never know how many things are hidden from a woman in good clothes. The bold, free look of a man at a woman he believes to be destitute. You must feel that look on you before you can understand a good half of history.
Now, Jean?
But where did you go, dressed like that?
Down among the homeless women, on a wet night, looking for shelter.
No wonder you've been ill.
And it's like that?
No,
No?
it's so much worse I dare not tell about it. Even if you weren't here, I couldn't.
Oh, Jean, you needn't suppose, darling, that those wretched creatures feel it as we would.
The girls who need shelter and work aren't all serving maids.
We know that all the women who make mistakes aren't.
That is why every woman ought to take interest in this. Every girl, too.
Jean, this is a matter for us older.
Or for a person who has some special knowledge. We can't pretend to have access to such sources of information as Miss Levering.
Yes, for I can give you access, as you seem to think I have some first-hand knowledge about homeless girls.
Well, my dear, it will all come inconvenient.
It once happened to me to take offense at an ugly thing that was going on under my father's roof. Oh, years ago. I was an impulsive girl. I turned my back on my father's house.
That was ill-advised.
Of course, if a girl does that.
That was what all my relations said, and I couldn't explain.
Not to your mother?
She was dead. I went to London to a small hotel and tried to find employment. I wandered about all day and every day, from agency to agency. I was supposed to be educated. I'd been brought up partly in Paris. I could play several instruments and sing little songs in 4 different tongues.
Did nobody want you to teach French or sing little songs?
The head of schools thought me too young. There were people ready to listen to my singing, but the terms, they were too hard. Soon my money was gone. I began to pawn my trinkets. They went.
And still no work?
No, but by that time I had some real education, an unpaid hotel bill and not a shilling in the world. Some girls think it hardship to have to earn their living. The horror is not to be allowed to.
What happened?
My dear, have your things been sent down? Are you quite ready?
Yes, all but my hat.
Well?
Well, by chance, I met a friend of my family.
That was lucky.
I thought so. He was nearly 10 years older than I, and he said he wanted to help me.
And he didn't?
Perhaps after all he did. Why do I waste time over myself? I belonged to the little class of armed women. My body wasn't born weak, and my spirit wasn't broken by the habit of slavery. But, as Mrs. Harriet was kind enough to hint, I do know something about the possible fate of homeless girls. I found there were pleasant parks, museums, free libraries in our great, rich London, and not one single place where destitute women can be sure of work that isn't killing or food that isn't worse than prison fare. That's why women ought not to sleep on nights till this shelter stands spreading out wide arms.
No. No.
Even when it's built, you'll see many of those creatures would prefer the life they lead. They like it.
A woman told me, one of the sort that knows, told me many of them like it so much that they're indifferent to the risk of being sent to prison. It gives them a rest, she said.
A rest?
I want to begin to understand something of... Oh, I'm horribly ignorant.
I'm a rather busy person.
I have a quite special reason for wanting not to be ignorant. I'll go to town tomorrow, if you'll come and lunch with me.
Thank you. I must go and put my hat on.
Oh, little she minds all these horrors.
They turn me cold. Oh, I wonder if she signed the visitor's book.
For all her shelter schemes, she's a hard woman.
Miss Levering is.
Of course you won't think so. She is angled very adroitly for your sympathy.
She doesn't look hard.
I'm not sure what she does. Her mouth, always like this, as if she were holding something back by main force.
Well, so she is.
Why haven't I seen her before?
Oh, she's lived abroad. You don't know about her, I suppose?
I don't know how Aunt Ellen came to know her.
Oh, that was my doing, but I didn't bargain for her being introduced to you.
She seems to go everywhere, and why shouldn't she?
You mustn't ask her to Eaton Square.
I have.
Then you'll have to get out of it.
Well, I must have a reason. A very good reason.
Well, it's not a thing I should have preferred to tell you, but I know how difficult you are to guide, so I suppose you'll have to know. It was 10 or 12 years ago. I found her horribly ill in a lonely Welsh farmhouse. We had taken the manor for that August. The farmer's wife was frightened and begged me to go and see what I thought. I soon saw how it was. I thought she was dying.
Dying? Well, what was the...
I got no more out of her than the farmer's wife did. She'd had no letters. There'd been no one to see her, except a man down from London. A shady-looking doctor. Nameless, of course. And then this result. The farmer and his wife, highly respectable people, were incensed. They were for turning the girl out.
Oh, but...
Yes, pitiless. Some of these people are. I insisted they should treat the girl humanely, and we became friends. That is, sort of, in spite of all I did for her.
What did you do?
Oh, I've told you. And I lent her money. No small sum, either.
Has she never paid it back?
Oh, yes, after a time. But I always kept her secret, as much as I knew of it.
But you've been telling me.
That was my duty, and I never had her full confidence.
Well, wasn't it natural that she...
Well, all things considered, she might have wanted to tell me who was responsible.
Oh, Aunt Lydia.
All she ever said was that she was ashamed. Ashamed that she hadn't had the courage to resist. Not the original temptation, but the pressure brought to bear on her not to go through with it, as she said.
You're being so delicate. I'm not sure I understand.
The only thing you need to understand is that she's not a desirable companion for a young girl.
Well, when did you see her after?
I met her last winter at the bishop's. Oh, she's a connection of his wife's. They'd got her to help with some of their work. Then she took hold of ours. Aunt and uncle are quite foolish about her, and I'm debarred from taking any steps, at least till the shelter is out of hand.
I do rather wonder she can bring herself to talk about the unfortunate women of the world.
The effrontery of it!
Or the courage.
Even presumes to set me right. Of course, I don't mind in the least, poor soul, but I feel I owe it to your dead mother to tell you about her, especially as you're old enough now to know something about life.
And since a girl needn't be very old to suffer for her ignorance, I felt she was rather wonderful.
Wonderful?
To have lived through that when she was... how old?
Oh, 19 or thereabouts.
5 years younger than I, to be abandoned and to come out of it like this?
Oh dear, it was too bad to tell you such a sordid story. Today of all days.
It is a very terrible story, but it wasn't a bad time. I feel very sorry today for the women who aren't happy. Oh, that must be Geoffrey.
Mr. Stoner! What makes you think?
Yes, I'm sure.
Who do you think is motoring up the drive?
Oh dear, how am I ever going to be able to behave like a girl who isn't engaged to the only man in the world worth marrying?
You were expecting Mr. Stoner all the time?
Well, he promised he'd come to luncheon if it was humanly possible. I was afraid to tell you for fear he'd prevented.
You felt we couldn't have borne the disappointment?
I felt I couldn't.
Here's an agreeable surprise.
How do you do?
I do.
Yes, by Jove! What gigantic luck!
How do you do?
Oh, such a long time since we met.
You're growing very enterprising, Mr. Stoner. I could hardly believe my ears when I heard you'd motored all the way from town to see a supporter on Sunday.
Well, I don't know how we covered the ground in the old days. It's no use to stand for your borough anymore. The American, you know, he runs for Congress. By and by, we shall be flying after the thing we want.
There's all sorts of irrelevant people here.
How do you do, Mr. Stoner?
How do you do?
Some of them were arguing in the smoking room last night whether it didn't hurt a man's chances going about in a motor.
Yes, we've been hearing a lot of stories about the unpopularity of motor cars. Among the class that hasn't got them, of course. What do you say?
I'm sure you gain more votes by being able to reach so many more of your constituents.
Well, I don't know. It's sometimes wondered whether the charm of our presence wasn't counterbalanced by the way we set about smothering our fellow beings in dust and running down the pigs and chickens, not to speak of the children.
What, on the whole, are the prospects?
We shall have to work harder than we realized.
He says he believes I'll be able to make a real difference to his chances. Isn't it angelic of him?
Angelic, Machiavellian. I pin all my hopes on your being able to counteract the pernicious influence of my opponent's glib wife.
You want me to have a real share in it all, don't you, Geoffrey?
Of course I do.
I don't gather you're altogether sanguine. Any complication?
Well, there's this agitation about the women question. Oddly enough, it seems likely to affect the issue.
Well, why should it? Can't you do what the other 400 have done?
Easily, but you see, the mere facts that 420 members and were into promising support, and then once in the House have let the matter severely alone.
Alone? Bless my soul, I should think so indeed.
Of course, only it's a device that's somewhat worn.
Still, if they think they're getting a future cabinet minister on their side...
Be sufficiently embarrassing for the cabinet minister.
You know one another?
Everybody in this part of the world knows Mr. Stoner, but he doesn't know me.
Mr. Stoner, Miss Levering.
Oh, have you been hearing him speak?
Yes, I was visiting some relations near Dutfield. They took me to hear you.
Oh, the night the suffragettes made their customary row, eh?
The night they asked you.
Well, Mrs. Freddy, what do you think of your friends
My
now?
friends?
You know, the disorderly women.
They are not my friends, but I don't think you must call them.
Why not? I can forgive them for worrying the late government, but they are disorderly.
Isn't the phrase consecrated to a different class?
Well, he's perfectly right. How do you do? Disorderly women, that is what they are.
Ought to be locked up, every one of them.
Public nuisances. Going around with dog whips and spitting in policemen's faces.
I wonder if they did spit.
Well, of course they did.
You're no authority on what they do. You run away.
Run away? Well, yes. And if ever I muster up enough courage to come back, it will be to vote for better manners. No worse than we have already in public life.
So should I. Don't think that I defend the suffrage's methods.
Still, you are an advocate of the suffrage, aren't you?
I don't beat the air.
Well, only policemen.
If you care to know the attitude of the real workers in the reform, you might have noticed in any paper last week we lost no time in disassociating ourselves with a little group of hysterical...
They have lowered the whole sex in the eyes of the entire world.
I can't quite see what they want, those suffragettes.
Notoriety.
What they want? A good thrashing. That's what I'd give them.
Spirited fellow.
Well, there's one sure thing. They've dished their goose. I believe these silly scenes are a pure joy to you.
Well, it's a final death blow to the whole silly business.
The suffragettes don't seem to know they're dead.
They still keep up a sort of a death rattle. But they've done for themselves.
I hope they'll last till the election's over.
Why?
Oh, we want them to get the working man to vote for the conservative candidate. Isn't that so?
Oh, fancy Jean!
The working man's a good deal of an ass, but even he won't listen to women.
But he does listen, like anything. I've asked why there were so few at the Long Mitcham meeting, and I was told, oh, they've all gone to hear Miss...
Just for a lark, that was.
It has no real effect on the vote.
Not the smallest.
Why, I thought you said...
I've a notion a little soap and water wouldn't do me any harm.
I'll take you up. You know Freddie Tunbridge?
Oh, Freddie.
Well, if women are of no importance in politics, it isn't for the reason you gave. There is now and then a weekender among them.
Oh, Lord, the perils that beset the feet of men.
Mr. Farnborough, why does he behave like that?
His moral sense is shocked.
Why, I saw him and Miss Freddy together at the French play the other night, as thick as thieves.
Ah, that was before he knew her revolting views.
What revolting views?
Sunday.
I can't believe women are so helpless when I see men so afraid of them.
Oh, the great mistake wasn't teaching them to read and write.
Miss Levering, say something.
Oh no, that wasn't the worst mistake.
Oh, yes, it was.
No, believe me, the mistake was in letting women learn to talk.
I see now. What's right, what's to be the next great reform.
When women are all dumb, no more discussions of the Paradiso.
The thing itself. Well, that's a great deal better than talking about it, as I'm sure that you know.
Why do you think I know?
Only the plain women are in any doubt. Wait for me, Farnborough. I cannot go about unprotected.
If it's true what that old cynic says, the scene in the house has put back the reformer generation.
I'd wish I'd been there.
I was.
Oh, was it like the paper said?
Worse. I've never been so moved in public. No tragedy, no great opera ever gripped an audience as the situation in the house did that night. There we all sat breathless with everything more favorable to us than had been within a memory of women. Another 5 minutes and the resolution would have passed, then all in a moment...
Listen, they're talking about the female hooligans.
No, thank you.
All in a moment, a horrible dinging little flag was poked through the grills of the women's gallery. Cries, insults, scuffling, the police, the ignominious returning out of the women, as well as the... Oh, I can't think of it without... Then the next morning, the people gloating. Our friends antagonized, people were wavering, nearly won over, all thrown back, heartbreaking. Even my husband Freddie has been an angel about letting me take my share when I felt I must. But of course I've always known he doesn't really like it. It makes him dry, shy. I'm sure it gives him a horrid twist inside when he sees my name among the speakers on the placards. But he's always been an angel about it before this. And after the disgraceful scene, he said, it just shows how unfit women are for any sort of coherent thinking or concerted action.
To think that it should be women who given the cause the worst blow it ever had.
The work of 40 years destroyed in 5 minutes.
They must have felt pretty sick when they woke up the next morning. The suffragettes.
I don't waste any sympathy on them. I'm thinking of the penalty of all women have to pay because of a handful of hysterical...
Still, I think I'm sorry for them. It must be dreadful to find you've done such a lot of harm to the thing that you care most about in the world.
Do you picture the suffragettes sitting in sackcloth?
Well, they can't help realizing now what they've done.
Isn't it just possible? They realize they've waked up interest in the woman question so that it's advertised in every paper and discussed in every house from Land's End to John O'Groats. Don't you think they know there's been more said and written about it in these 10 days since the scene than in the 10 years before it?
You aren't saying you think it was a good way to get what they wanted.
I'm only pointing out that it seems not such a bad way to get it known they do want something and want it bad.
Didn't Mr. Greatorex say women had been politely petitioning Parliament for 40 years?
And men have only laughed.
But they'd come round. Miss Tunbridge says before that horrid scene everything was favourable at last.
At last. Hadn't it been just as favourable before?
No, we had never had so many members pledged to our side.
I thought I'd heard somebody say the bill had got as far as that time and time again.
Oh, surely not.
Yes, this was only a resolution. The bill passed the second reading 37 years ago.
And what difference did it make?
The men laughed rather louder.
Oh, it's got as far as the second reading several times, but we never had so many friends in the house before.
Friends?
Why do you say it like that?
Perhaps because I was thinking of a funny story. He said it was funny. A liberal whip told me the other day. A radical member went out of the house after his speech in favour of the woman's bill. And as he came back half an hour later, he heard some members talking in the lobby about the astonishing number who were going to vote for the measure. And the friend of woman dropped his jaw and clutched the man next to him. "My God," he said, "you don't mean to say they're going to give it to them?"
Oh.
You don't think all the men in Parliament are like that?
I don't think all men are burglars, but I lock my doors.
You think the night of the scene, you think the men didn't mean to play fair?
Didn't the women sit quiet till 10 minutes to closing time?
10 minutes to settle a question like that.
Mrs. Freddy, couldn't you see the men were at their old game?
I think they were just putting off the issue till it was too late.
I wasn't there, but I haven't heard anybody deny that the women waited till 10 minutes to 11. Then they discovered the policeman who'd been sent up at the psychological moment to the back of the gallery. Then I'm told, when the women saw they were betrayed once more, they utilized the few minutes left to impress on the country at large the fact of their demands. Did it the only way left them. It does rather look, to the outsider, as if the well-behaved women had worked for 40 years and made less impression on the world than those fiery young women made in 5 minutes.
Oh, now come on, be fair.
Well, you must admit that the next day, every newspaper reader in Europe and America knew there were women in England in such dead earnest about the suffrage that the men had stopped laughing at last, and turned them out of the house. Men even advertised how little they appreciated the fun by sending the women to jail in pretty sober earnest, and all the world was talking about it.
I have noticed, whenever the men aren't there, the women sit and discuss that scene.
I shan't have to wait till the men are gone. He's in sympathy.
How do you know?
He told the interrupting woman so.
Oh.
You're judging from the outside. Those of us who've been working for years, we all realize it was a perfectly lunatic proceeding. Why think the only chance of our getting what we want is by winning over the men?
Well,
No, I forgot.
Winning over the men has been the women's way for centuries. Do you think the result should make us proud of our policy? Yes? Then go and walk in Piccadilly at midnight. No, I forgot.
Yes, it's not the first time you've forgotten.
I forgot the magistrate's ruling. He said no decent woman had any business to be in London's main thoroughfare at night unless she has a man with her. I heard that in Nine Elms too. You're obliged to take up with a chap, was what the woman said.
Jean, come!
My dear, I think Lydia Harriet's right. We oughtn't to do anything or say anything to encourage this ferment of feminism, and I'll tell you why. It's likely to bring a very terrible thing in its train.
What terrible thing?
Sex antagonism.
It's here.
Don't say that.
Lady John, you're so conscious it's here. You're afraid to have it mentioned.
If it's here, it's the fault of those women agitators.
No woman begins that way. Every woman's in a state of natural subjection. No, I'd rather say allegiance to her idea of romance and her hope of motherhood. They're embodied for her in man. They're the strongest things in life, till man kills them. Let's be fair. Each woman knows why that allegiance died.
Miss Levering, all this talk against the wicked suffragettes, it makes me want to go and hear what they've got to say for themselves.
Well, they're holding a meeting in Trafalgar Square at 3 o'clock.
This afternoon? Well, but that's no use to people out of town. Unless I could invent some...
Still talking over the shelter plans?
No, we left the shelter some time ago.
Then what's all the chatterment about?
The latest thing in Wales.
Oh, the invincible frivolity of women.
Oh, don't scold them. It's a very proper topic.
Oh, I was afraid you'd despise us for it.
Oh,
not at all.
Not at all.
Oh, Miss Levering, they're coming for you. Don't forget your book. Oh, it's for me.
But it's time I was, too.
May I? Miss Levering, I've got your book. Dante, whereabouts are you? Oh, the Inferno.
No, I'm in a worse place.
I didn't know there was a worse.
Yes, it's worse with the Vigliacci.
I forget. Were they Gulf or Gibelline?
They weren't either, and that was why Dante couldn't stand them. He said there was no place in heaven nor in purgatory, not even a corner in hell, for the souls who had stood aloof from strife. He called them wretches who never lived, Dante did, and because they'd never felt the pangs of partisanship. And so they wander homeless on the skirts of limbo among the abortions and offscourings of creation.
Aunt Ellen, I've got to go to London.
My dear child.
Nonsense. Is your grandfather worse?
No, I don't think so, but it's necessary I should go all the same.
Go away when Mr. Stoner...
He said he'd have to leave directly after luncheon.
I'll just see Miss Levering off, and then I'll come back and talk about it.
Miss Levering, why are you saying goodbye as if you were never coming back?
One never knows. Maybe I shan't come back. Goodbye, Mr. Stoner.
There may be another train, Miss Levering.
What if there isn't? I'll take you back in the motor.
Will you? Oh, I must be there by 3.
My, it's only invitation to dine Wednesday.
Shh.
Oh, I see. Rather dear of you to arrange our going off like that. You are a clever girl.
It's not that I was arranging. I want to hear those women in Trafalgar Square. The suffragettes.
Perfectly absurd. Besides, I expect Lady John wouldn't like me carrying you off like that.
Well, then she'll have to make an excuse and come too.
I wouldn't quite be the same.
We could get back here in time for dinner.
A handkerchief.
Mine?
No. Miss.
Oh, but that's not an L, it's a V.
come, VIDA, since you will go?
Yes, I'm coming.
I didn't know her name was VIDA. How did you?
The north side of Nosum Column in Trafalgar Square. The crowd, which momentarily increases, is composed chiefly of weedy youths and Western old men. There are a few decent artisans, 3 or 4 beery out-to-the-works, 3 or 4 young women of the domestic servant or Strand restaurant cashier class, 1 aged woman in rusty black peering with faded, wandering eyes, consulting the faces of the men and laughing nervously and apologetically from time to time. 1 or 2 quiet-looking, business-like women, 30 to 40. 2 middle-class men who stare and whisper and smile. A quiet old man with a lot of unsold Sunday newspapers under one arm stands in an attitude of rapt attention, with the free hand round his deaf ear. A brisk-looking woman of 45 or so, wearing pince-nez, goes round with a pile of propagandist literature under her arm. Many of the men smoking cigarettes, the old ones pipes. On the outskirts of this crowd of several hundred, a couple of smart men in tall, shining hats hover a few moments, single eyeglass up, and then saunter off. Against the middle of the column, where it rises above the stone platform, is a great red banner, one supporting pole upheld by a grimy sandwichman, the other by a small dirty boy of 8. If practicable, only the lower portion of the banner need be seen, bearing the final words of the legend, "Votes for Women," in immense white letters.
I've got boys of my own, and we laugh at all sorts of things, but I should be ashamed, and so would they if they was to behave as you're doing today. People have been saying this is a middle-class women's movement. It's a libel. I'm a working woman myself, the wife of a working man.
Poor devil!
I'm a poor law guardian, and
What now, gracious me!
Shut up, cancer!
Not for you!
You haven't done your old man's stockings.
Just clean your own doorstep.
it's a poor sort of housekeeper that leaves her doorstep till Sunday afternoon. Maybe that's when you would do your doorstep. I do mine in the morning before you men are awake.
It's true what she says, every word.
You say we women have got no business serving on boards and thinking about politics? What's politics? Speaking on a big scale. Who among you working men has the most comfortable homes? Those of you that gives your wives your wages. It was only to use for our comfort. Do you think many of you working men would be found turning over their wages to their wives? sure. What's the reason thousands do, and the best and the soberest? Because the working man knows that what's a pound to him is 20 shillings to his wife, and she'll make every penny in every one of them shillings tell. She gets more for him out of his wages than what he can. Some of you know what the homes is like where the men don't let the women manage. Well, the poor laws and the old government is just in the same muddle because the men have tried to do the national housekeeping without the women. But like I told you before, it's a libel to say it's only the well-off women what's wanting the vote. What about 96,000 textile workers? What about the Yorkshire tailoresses? I can tell you what plenty of poor women think about it. I'm one of them, and I can tell you we see there's reforms needed. We ought to have the vote. And we know how to appreciate the other women who go to prison for trying to get it for us.
Rock and rolls in the streets.
Keep quiet, can't you?
Oh, you evidently don't know what had to be done by men before the extension of the suffrage in 67. But it hadn't been for the demonstration of violence.
Shut your gob!
You say woman's place is home. Don't you know there's a third of the women of this country can't afford the luxury of staying in their homes? They got to go out and help make money to pay the rent and keep the home from being sold up. Then there's all the women that haven't got even miserable homes. They haven't got any homes at all.
Say you got one, or are you stopping it?
Yeah, that's like a man. If one of you is all right, he thinks the rest don't matter. We women...
The ladies, God bless them.
Take that extra half a pint home and sleep it off.
Our homes are all right. Perhaps you aren't living old and young, married and single in one room. I come from a place where many families have to live like that if they're to go on living at all. If you don't believe me, come and let me show you. Come with me to Canning Town. Come with me to Bromley. Come to Poplar and a Bow. Nah, you won't even think about the overworked women and the underfed children and the hovels they live in. And you want that we shouldn't think neither.
Do the thinking. You let them nurse the baby.
I do nurse my baby. I've nursed 7. What have you done for yours? Perhaps your children never goes hungry, and maybe you're satisfied. Though I must say I wouldn't have thought it from the look of you.
Oh, I say!
We women are not satisfied. We don't only want better things for our own children. We want better things for all. Every child is our child. We know in our hearts we oughtn't to rest till we've mothered every one of them.
Women, children, what about the men? Are they all happy?
I'm sorry for. And we'll help you if you let us.
Oh, boss, you take the bread out of our mouths. You women are black-legging the men.
Why does any woman take less wages than a man for the same work? Only because we can't get anything better. That's part of the reason why we're here today. Do you really think we take them their low wages because we got a liking for low wages? Nah, we're just like you. We want as much as ever we can get. We do with our wages, we women has. We got the children to think about. And when we get our rights, a woman's flesh and blood won't be so much cheaper than a man's. But employers can get rich by keeping you out of work and sweating us. If you men only could see it, we got the same cause. And if you helped us, you'd be helping yourselves.
Right!
Not even speak.
Get out of here!
Alright.
Oh no, that wasn't so bad. For a woman.
Oh, not for a woman.
Miss Ernestine Blunt will now address you.
Woo! Woo! Yeah! Ernestine Blunt! Woo!
Hoorah!
Perhaps I better begin by explaining a little bit about our tactics.
Oh, we know your tactics.
Speak up.
Fight in
What the
trouble!
hell is she?
To make you understand what we've done, I must remind you of what others have done. Perhaps you don't know that women first petitioned Parliament for the franchise as long ago as 1866.
How do you know?
You wasn't there.
That was the trouble.
And the petition was presented.
Give her a hearing now. She's a got out of her cradle.
Presented to the House of Commons by that great liberal, John Stuart Mill.
Mel, it was he when he's at home.
Bills or resolutions have been before the House on and off for the past 36 years. That roughly is our history. We found ourselves towards the close of the year 1905 with no assurance that if we went on in the same way, any girl born into the world in this generation would live to exercise the rights of citizenship, though she lived to be 100. So we said all this has been in vain. We must try another way. How do the working men get the suffrage, we asked ourselves? Well, we turned up the records.
Turned up the records? Can't even read!
But we don't want to follow such a violent example. We would much rather not, if that is the only way we can make the country see that we're in earnest. We're prepared to show them.
And they'll show you, give you another method.
Yeah!
Don't think that going to prison has any fears for us. We'd go for life if, by doing that, we could get freedom for the rest of the women.
Why don't the men help you to get your rights?
Yeah!
Here's someone asking why men don't help. Well, it's partly they don't understand yet. They will before we're done. Partly they don't understand what's at stake.
Oh, Lord.
They're
They're educating of us.
What next?
And partly that the bravest man is afraid of ridicule. Oh, yes. We've heard a great deal all our lives about the timidity and sensitiveness of women. And it is true, we are sensitive. But I tell you, ridicule crumbles a man up. It steals a woman. We've come to know the value of ridicule. We've educated ourselves so that we welcome ridicule. We owe our sincerest thanks to the comic writers. The cartoonist is our unconscious friend. Who cartoons people who are of no importance? What advertisement is so sure of being remembered?
I admit that.
And if we didn't know it by any other sign, the comic papers would tell us we've arrived. And our greatest debt of gratitude we owe to the man who called us female hooligans. We aren't hooligans, but we hope that fact will be overlooked. If everyone said we were nice, well-behaved women, well, who would come to hear us? Not the men.
Get out of here.
Men tell us it isn't womanly for us to care about politics. Huh. How do they know what is womanly? It is time for women to decide that. Let men attend to being manly. It'll take all their time.
Way down on it.
And they say it would be dreadful if we got to the boat. because then we'd be pitted against men in the economic struggle. But that's come about already. You know that out of every 100 women in this country, 82 are wage-earning women? It used to be thought unfeminine for women to be students and to aspire to the arts that bring fame and fortune. But no one has ever said it was unfeminine for women to do the heavy drudgery that's badly paid. That kind of work has to be done by somebody. And men didn't hanker after it. Oh no!
They can't talk, the little one can.
I can all talk.
I would like to be her husband.
Yeah.
Coming home to
Oh no! Let the women scrub and cook and wash. That's all right. But if they want to try their hand at the better paid work of the liberal professions, oh, very unfeminine indeed. Then there's another thing. Now I want you to listen to this because it's very important. Men say if we persist in competing with them for the bigger prizes, they're dreadfully afraid we lose the beautiful protecting chivalry that... Yes, I don't wonder you laugh. We laugh. Oh. But the women I found at the Fairy Tin Works working for 5 shillings a week, I didn't see them laughing. The beautiful chivalry of the employers of women doesn't prevent them from paying women 10 pence a day for sorting coal and loading and unloading carts. Doesn't prevent them from forcing women to earn money in ways worse still. So we won't go on talking about chivalry. It's being over sarcastic. Let's just let this poor ghost of chivalry go in exchange for a little plain justice.
If the House of Commons won't give you justice, why don't you go to the House of Lords?
What?
Thanks for early closing.
Is she one of them, that little thing?
Oh, I suppose so.
Oh, ask someone, Geoffrey. I'm so disappointed. I did so hope we'd hear one of the worst.
Wait, what? What did you say?
Can you tell me, my man, which are the ones that make the disturbances?
The one that's doing the talking. She's the disturbingest of the lot.
Oh, not that nice little thing.
Don't you be took in, miss.
Oh, yes. I see. Ah, there's a man over here asking.
Oh, is it question time? I got a question too. Are you married?
Quick! There's your chance! He's a bachelor!
Women get full citizenship and a war is declared. Will the women fight?
No. Really? No. Really? No.
Yes! How about that?
That's right.
Some people say the whole trouble about us is that we do fight. It's only hard necessity that makes us do that. We don't want to fight, as men seem to, just for the sake of fighting's sake. Women are for peace.
Yeah!
And when we have a share in public affairs, there will be less likelihood of war. But that's not to say women can't fight. The Boer women did. The Russian women face conflicts worse than any battlefield can show. But we women know all that is evil, and we're for peace. Our part, and we're proud to remember it, our part has been to go about after you men in wartime and pick up the pieces.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
That'd be fun.
Funny, doesn't it? You men blow them to bits, and then we come along and put them back together again. if you know anything about military nursing, you know a good deal of our work has been done in the face of danger. But it's always been done.
That's so.
You complain that more and more we're taking away from you men the work that's always been yours. You can't any longer keep women out of the industries. The only question is, upon what terms shall she continue to be in? As long as she's in on bad terms, she's not only hurting herself, she's hurting you. But if you're feeling discouraged about our competing with you, we're willing to leave you your trade in war. Let men take life. We give life. No one will pretend ours isn't one of the most dangerous trades either. Well, I won't say any more for you now, because we've got others to speak to you, and a new woman helper that I wanted you to hear.
They think that
Ernestine's a
Alright,
corker.
Not that corker.
Geoffrey?
Well,
Nothing reprehensible in what she said, was there?
no, reprehensible.
It makes me rather miserable all the same.
You mustn't take it all as hard as all that.
I can't help it. I can't indeed, Geoffrey. I shall never be able to make a speech like that.
I hope not, indeed.
Why, I thought you said you wanted me to.
To make nice little speeches with composure, and so I did. So
But you said...
that you have the very pink cheeks. Well, I stick to that.
Shh. Don't tell everybody.
The only female creature I ever saw that didn't look a fright in motor things.
I'm glad you don't think me a fright.
I will now ask for to address this meeting.
Oh, don't go yet, Aunt Helen.
Go? Certainly not. I want to hear another. I can't believe, she was really one of the worst.
That's Pilcher.
Who's Pilcher?
If you can't afford a bottle of Tahoe, why don't you get your hair cut?
I've been addressing a big meeting in Hammersmith this morning. And when I told them I was coming here this afternoon to speak for the women, well, then the usual thing began.
Right!
Yeah!
In these times, if you want peace and quiet at a public meeting, the man at Hammersmith too, talking about women's sphere being home. How do you call it? You've got a kennel where you can munch your tummy. You've got a corner where you can curl up for a few hours till you go out to work again. No, my men. There's too many of you ain't able to give the women homes to fit to live in. Too many of you in that fix for you to go on jawing at those of the women who want to make the homes a little decenter.
If the vote ain't done us any good, how will it do the women any good?
Look here. Any men here belonging to the Labour Party?
I hate the Labour Party.
Well, I don't need to tell these men the vote has done us some good. They know it. And it'll do us a lot more good when you know how to use the power you got in your hand.
Power? It's these fellers at the bottom of the street that got the power.
It's you and men like you that gave it to them. You carried the Liberals into Parliament Street on your own shoulders. You believed all their fine words. You never asked yourself, what's a Liberal anyway?
He's a jolly good fellow.
He's a good fellow. He's a jolly good fellow.
No, he ain't. Or if he is jolly, it's only because he thinks you're such silly codfish you'll go swelling his majority again. It's enough to make any Liberal jolly to see sheep like you looking on proud and happy, while you see Liberal leaders deserting Liberal principles.
Yeah, you're right.
You show me a Liberal, and I'll show you a Mr. Face in both ways, yes! He shits the lot of his warm and handsome smile on the working man. And round on the other side, he's dipping a wink to the great landowners. That's to let them know he's standing between them and the socialists. Huh? Socialists? Yes! Socialists!
Socialists!
Oh no! Socialists! The liberal. He's the judicial sort of chap that sits in the middle.
On the fence.
Tories one side, socialists the other. Well, it ain't always so comfortable in the middle. You're like to get squeezed. Now I say to the woman, the Conservatives don't promise you much, but what they promise, they do.
Gene, this fellow isn't half bad.
The Liberals, they'll promise you the earth and give you the whole of nothing.
Isn't it fun? Now aren't you glad I brought you?
That's rather amusing.
We men have seen it happen over and over. But the woman can take it quicker what we can. They won't stand the nonsense men do. Only they haven't got a fair chance even to agitate for their rights. As I was coming up here, I heard a man saying, "Look at this big crowd. Why, we're all men. If the women want to vote, why ain't they here to say so?" Well, I'll tell you why. It's because they've had to get the dinner for you and me, and now they're washing up the dishes.
But you think we ought to stay home and wash the dishes?
Not be quicker, right?
Well, if they'd leave it to us once or twice, perhaps we'd understand a little more about the women question. I know why my wife isn't here. It's because she knows I ain't much use round the house, and she's hoping I could talk to some purpose. Maybe she's mistaken. Anyhow, here I am to vote for her and all the other women. To tell you men what improvements you can expect to see when women has the share in public affairs they ought to have.
What do you know about it? You can't even talk grammar.
I'm not gonna talk grammar! It's a talk reform! I ain't defending my grammar. But I'll say in passing that if my mother had had her rights, maybe my grammar would have been better. Wait a bit, half a minute, my man.
Who you talking to? I ain't your man.
Lucky for me. There seems to be a gentleman here who doesn't think women ought to have the vote.
What?
You ain't it?
Perhaps he doesn't know much about women.
Oh, really?
Oh, the gentleman said he's married. Well then, for the sake of his wife, we mustn't be too sorry he's here. No doubt she's saying, "Heaven be praised, those women are making a demonstration in Trafalgar Square, and I'll have a little peace and quiet at home for one Sunday in my bloody life." Why, you're like the man at Hamza this morning. He was asking me, "Oh, would you like the man to stay at home and do the family washing?" I told him I wouldn't advise it. I have too much respect for me clothes.
It's their place. The women ought to do the washing.
Yeah.
I'm not sure you ain't right. For a good many of you fellas, from the look of you can't even wash yourself.
Golden too.
What do you mean?
Well, takes about 10 of your sort to make a man. So you may take it, I mean the lot of you.
What?
Oi,
What's that
you,
supposed
those
to
are
mean?
point words.
Who's he talking about?
Oh, you know.
Now there's another woman going to speak.
Oh, who is she? Oh, I do hope she's one of the wild ones.
That's all right then. When I've attended to this microbe that's vitiating the air, I'm all right.
We're going now.
No, not yet. Please, not yet. Oh, I do believe...
Lady John, I'm going to take Jean out of the mob. Will you come?
But, oh yes, if you think... But, isn't that... Surely it's...
Oh, Geoffrey!
Lady John's tired, Jean.
But you don't see who it is, Geoffrey.
I'll come down and attend to that microbe, while a lady will say a few words to you. If she can make herself heard!
Someone suggests, and it's such a good idea, I'd like you to listen to it. A clause be inserted in the next suffrage bill that shall expressly reserve to each cabinet minister and to any respectable man the power to prevent the franchise being given to the female members of his family on his public declaration of their lack of sufficient intelligence to entitle them to vote. I ask you now to listen as quietly as you can to a lady who is not accustomed to speaking in Trafalgar Square or, as a matter of fact, at all.
Dumb lady. Yes, to the dumb lady.
A lady who, as I have said, will tell you, if you behave yourselves, her impressions in the administration of police court justice in this country.
Mr. Chairman, men and women...
Speak up!
I just wanted to tell you that I was present in the police court when the women were charged for creating a disturbance.
You oughtn't get mixed up in what don't concern you.
No, see here, men. Don't interrupt.
Good, I like this one, Dad. You can see she ain't one of them.
Disgracing women behind you.
It's the way they goes on as makes the government keep you from getting your rights.
It's the way that you go on that...
Look here. If the government withhold the vote because they don't like the way some of us ask for it, then let them give it to the quiet ones. Does the government want to punish all women just because they don't like the manners of a handful? Perhaps that's you men's notion of justice. It isn't women's.
Yes. This is the first time I've ever gone on, as you call it, but they never gave me a vote.
No! And there are 1, 2, 3, 4 women on this platform. Now, all we want, the vote, we all want the vote, as you know. Well, we'd agree to be disenfranchised all our lives if they give the vote to all the other women.
Look here, you made
one speech. Give the lady a chance.
Yes, that is just what I wanted you to do.
Perhaps you don't know. You don't know.
I'm going to know if you can't tell us. Take your time, why don't you?
Thank you for that. We couldn't have a better motto. How are you to know if we can't somehow manage to tell you? Well, I certainly didn't know. Before that, the sergeants and policemen are instructed to deceive the people as to the time such cases are heard. You ask, and you're sent to Marlborough Police Court instead of to Marylebone.
Hey, got to send you to Alloway. There you go.
Come on, miss, don't mind them.
You're told the case will be at 2 o'clock and it's really called for 11. Well, I took a great deal of trouble and I didn't believe what I was told. Yes, that's almost the first thing we have to learn. To get over our touching faith that because a man tells us something, it's true. I got to the right court and I was so anxious not to be late. I was too early. The case before the women's was just coming on. I heard a noise. At the door, I saw the helmets of 2 policemen, and I said to myself, what sort of crime shall I have to sit and hear about? Is this a burglar coming along between the 2 big policemen? Or will it be a murderer? What sort of felon is to stand in the dock before the women whose crime is they ask for the vote? But try as I would, I couldn't see the prisoner. My heart misgave me. Is it a woman? I wondered. Then the policeman got nearer, and I saw a little, thin, half-starved boy. What do you think he was charged with? Stealing. What had he been stealing, this small criminal? Milk. It seemed to me, as I sat there looking on, that the men who had the affairs of the world in their hands from the beginning, and who've made so poor a business of it, as to have the poor and unemployed
downhearted
in the condition they're in today, when your only remedy for a starving child is to hail him off to the police court because he had managed to get a little milk. Well, I did wonder that the men refused to be helped with a problem they've so notoriously failed at. I began to say to myself, isn't it time the women lent a hand?
Would you have women magistrates?
Magistrates. Women, them prove first they deserve it.
They studied music by thousands. Where's their Beethoven? Where's their Plato? Where's the women's Shakespeare?
Yes! What are they ever done?
Yeah!
That's right.
These questions are quite proper. They are often asked elsewhere, and I would like to ask in return, since when was human society held to exist for its handful of geniuses? How many Platos are there in this crowd?
7-1!
Not one. Yet that doesn't keep you men off the register. How many Shakespeare are there in all of England today? Not one. Yet the state doesn't tumble to pieces. Railroads and ships are built, homes are kept going, and babies are born. The world goes on. It goes on by virtue of its common people. I am not concerned that you should think we women can paint great pictures, or compose immortal music, or write good books. I'm content that we should be classed with the common people who keep the world going. But I'd like the world to go a great deal better. We were talking about justice. I have been inquiring into the kind of lodging the poorest class of homeless women can get in this town of London. I find that only the men of that class are provided for. Some measure to establish Roughton houses for women has been before the London County Council. They looked into the question very carefully, so their apologists say. And what did they decide? They decided that they could do nothing.
Is that true?
I don't know.
Why could that great, all-powerful body do nothing? Because if these cheap and decent houses were open, they said, the homeless women in the streets would make use of them. You'll think I'm not in earnest, but that was actually the decision and the reason given for it. Women that the bitter struggle for existence has forced into a life of horror.
Lady John, do you think this is the kind of thing...
The outcast women might take advantage of the shelter these decent, cheap places offered. But the men, I said, are all who avail themselves of Lord Rowton's houses, hostels. Are they all angels? Or does wrongdoing in a man not matter? Yet women are recommended to depend on the chivalry of men. Justice and chivalry. They both remind me of what those of you who read the police court news. I have begun only lately to do that. But you've seen the accounts of the girl who's been tried in Manchester lately for the murder of a child. Not pleasant reading. Even if we'd noticed it, we wouldn't speak of it in my world. A few months ago, I should have turned away my eyes and forgotten even the headline as quickly as I could. But since that morning in the police court, I read these things. This, as you'll remember, was about a little working girl, an orphan of 18, who crawled with the dead body of a newborn child to her master's back door and left the baby there. She dragged herself a little way off and fainted. A few days later, she found herself in court, being tried for the murder of her child. Her master, a married man, had of course reported the find at his back door to the police, and he had been summoned to give evidence. The girl cried out to him in the open court, "You are the father!" He couldn't deny it. The coroner, at the jury's request, censured the man and regretted that the law didn't make him responsible. But he went scot-free. And that girl is now serving her sentence in Strangeways jail.
Story.
Why do you dislike her so, Geoffrey?
Why should you think?
I never saw you look as you did.
Order, please. Please give the lady a fair hearing.
Men make boast that an English citizen is tried by his peers. What woman is tried by hers? A woman is arrested by a man, brought before a man judge, tried by a jury of men, condemned by men, taken to prison by a man, and by a man she's hanged. Where in all of this were her peers? Why did men so long ago insist on trial by a jury of their peers? So that justice shouldn't miscarry, wasn't it? A man's peers would best understand his circumstances, his temptation, the degree of his guilt. Yet there's no such unlikeness between different classes of men as exists between man and woman. What man has the knowledge that makes him a fit judge of woman's deeds at that time of anguish, that hour that some woman struggled through to put each man here into the world? I noticed when a previous speaker quoted the Labour Party, you applauded. Some of you here, I gather, call yourselves Labour men? Every woman who has borne a child is a Labour woman! No man among you can judge what she goes through in her hour of darkness.
Geoffrey?
In that great agony, when even under the best conditions that money and devotion can buy, many a woman falls into temporary mania. And not a few. down to death. The case of this poor, little abandoned working girl. What man can be the fit judge of her deeds in that awful moment of half-crazed temptation? Women know of these things as those know burning who have walked through fire. I would say in conclusion to the women here, it's not enough to be sorry for these our unfortunate sisters. We must get conditions of life made fairer. We women must organize. We must learn to work together. We have all, rich and poor, happy and unhappy, worked so long and so exclusively for men. We hardly know how to work for one another. But we must learn. Those who can may give money.
Oh, there it is!
Those who haven't pennies
to
to
money.
give. Even those people aren't so poor they can't give some part of their labor, some share of their sympathy and support.
Oh, Lady John, I'm so glad I've got power.
Power? You?
Yes, all that money.
Oh yes. I hope you'll all join the union. Come up after the meeting and give your names.
They won't get money, men!
Then it's to the women I appeal! I don't mean to say it wouldn't be better if men and women did this work together, shoulder to shoulder. But the mass of men won't have it so. I only hope they'll realize in time the good they've renounced and the spirit they've aroused. For I know, as well as any man could tell me, it would be a bad day for all of England if all women felt about all men as I do!
Dean, here, follow me.
No,
You're
no.
going the wrong way.
This is the way I must go.
You can get out quicker on this side.
I don't want to get out.
What? Where are you going?
To ask that woman to let me have the honor of working with her.
The drawing room at old Mr. Dunbarton's house in Eaton Square. 6 o'clock the same evening. The door opens and Jean appears on the threshold. She looks back into her sitting room, then crosses into the drawing room, treading softly on the parquet spaces between the rugs. She goes to the window and is in the act of parting the lace curtains when the folding doors are opened by me. She goes softly.
Shh, shh. Speak low, please.
Yes, ma'am. She goes softly to the back door she has left open, closes it carefully. When she returns, I have stepped aside to admit Geoffrey Stoner, and I have departed, shutting the folding doors.
Speak low.
I waited for a whole hour for you to come back. If you don't mind leaving me like that, you might have considered Lady John.
Is she here with you?
No, my place was nearer than this, and she was very tired. I left her to get some tea. We couldn't tell whether you'd be here or what had become of you.
Mr. Trent got us in hansom.
Trent?
The chairman of the meeting.
Got us?
Miss Levering and me.
Miss Levering?
Mr. Farnborough.
At last! You'll forgive this incursion, Miss Dunbarton. When you hear... Mr. Stoner, they've been telegraphing you all over London. In despair, they set me on your track.
Who did? What's up?
There was the devil to pay at Dutfield last night. The Liberal chap tore down from London and took over your meeting.
Oh, it's nothing about it in the Sunday paper I saw.
Wait till you see the press tomorrow morning. There was a great rally and the beggar made a rousing speech.
What about?
Abolition of the upper house.
They were at that when I was at Eton.
Yes. But this new man has got a way of putting things. The people went mad. The Liberal platform, as defined at Dutfield, is going to make a big difference.
You think so?
Well, your agent says as much.
My... Try find Stoner.
Tremendous effect of last night's Liberal manifesto ought to be counteracted in tomorrow's papers. You see, Mr. Stoner, it's a battle cry we want.
Claptrap!
Well, they've been saying we have nothing to offer but personal popularity. No practical reform, no...
No truckling to the masses, I suppose.
Well, in these democratic days... Jean, I hope you forgive my bursting in like this, but I can see you realize the gravity... It isn't as if he were going to be a mere private member. Everybody knows he'll be in the cabinet.
It may be a Liberal cabinet.
Nobody thought so up to last night. Why, even your brother... But I'm afraid I'm seeming officious.
What about my brother?
I met Lord Windlesham as I rushed out of the Carlton.
Did he say anything?
I told him the Dutfield news.
Well?
He said it only confirmed his fears.
Said that, did he?
Yes. Defeat is inevitable, he thinks, unless you can manufacture some political dynamite within the next few hours. Those were his words.
Jean, oh, you are very tired.
Oh, no.
Mr. Farnsworth, I'm obliged to you for taking so much trouble. I'll see what can be done.
If you'd like to wire, I'll take it.
No, you don't understand, my friend. Moves of this kind must not be rushed by responsible politicians. It must have time for consideration.
Oh, well, I only hope someone else won't jump into the breach before you. I tell you, Jean, I'll find out what time the newspapers go to press on Sunday. Goodbye. Mr. Stoner, I'll be at the club just in case I can be of any use.
No, don't do that. If I should have anything new to say...
But with our party, as your brother said, heading straight for a vast electoral disaster.
If I decide on a counterblast, I shall simply telegraph to headquarters. Goodbye.
Oh, goodbye.
Political dynamite, eh? After all, women are much more conservative than men, aren't they? Especially the women the property qualification would bring in. Huh. You see now. One reason why I've encouraged you to take an interest in public affairs, Jean, because people like us don't go screaming about it is no sign we don't, some of us, see what's on the way. However little they want to, women of our class will have to come into line. And all the best things in the world, everything that civilization has won, will be in danger when this change comes, if the only women who have practical political training are the women of the lower classes. Women of the lower classes and women inoculated by the socialist virus.
Geoffrey?
Let us see, how shall we put it? When the time comes, shall we... Enough dynamite in that, rather too much, isn't there, little girl? Huh.
Geoffrey, I know her story.
Whose story?
Miss Levering's.
Whose?
VIDA Levering's. Why did you desert her? Why did you do it?
What in the name of... What has she been saying to you?
Someone else told me the part. The way you looked when you saw her at Aunt Ellen's. Miss Levering saying you didn't know her, then you're letting out that you even knew the curious name on the handkerchief. I pieced it together.
Your ingenuity is undeniable.
And then when she said that in the meeting about the darkest hour and I looked at your face, it flashed over me. Why did you desert her?
I didn't desert her.
Ah. And I'm glad. She went away from you then.
You don't expect me to enter into...
She went away from you?
Yes.
Was it because you wouldn't marry her?
I couldn't marry her, and she knew it.
Did you want to?
I thought I did then. It's a long time ago.
And why couldn't you?
Why are you catechizing me? It's a matter that concerns another woman.
If you're saying it doesn't concern me, you're saying that you don't concern me.
In those days, I was absolutely dependent on my father.
Well, you must have been 30, Geoffrey.
What? Thereabouts?
And everybody says you're so clever.
And everybody's mistaken.
It must have been terribly hard. For you both. That a man like you shouldn't have the freedom that even the lowest seem to have.
Freedom?
To marry the woman they choose.
She didn't break off our relations because I couldn't marry her.
Why was it then?
I was too young to discuss such a story.
Not so young as what she was when...
Very well, then. If you will have it, the truth is, It didn't seem to weigh upon her, as it seems to on you, that I wasn't able to marry her.
Why are you so sure of that?
Because she didn't so much as hint such a thing when she wrote that she meant to break off the...
What made her write like that?
Why will you go on talking about what's long over and ended?
What reason did she give?
Your curiosity's got the upper hand. Ask her.
You're afraid to tell me.
I still hoped, at that time, to win my father over. She blamed me because... If the child had lived, it wouldn't have been possible to get my father to overlook it.
You wanted it overlooked? I don't understand.
Of course you don't. If you did, you wouldn't be the beautiful, tender, innocent child you are.
I am glad you didn't mean to desert her. It wasn't your fault after all, only some misunderstanding that can be cleared up.
Cleared up?
Yes, cleared up.
You aren't thinking that this miserable old affair I as good as forgotten.
Forgotten?
No, I don't mean exactly forgotten. But you're torturing me, so I don't know what I'm saying. You aren't... Jean, you aren't going to let it come between you and me.
I can't make or unmake what's past. But I'm glad at least you didn't mean to desert her in trouble. You'll remind her of that first of all, won't you?
Where are you going? Why should I remind anybody of what I only want to forget?
Shh.
You don't mean that she's...
Yes. I left her to get a little rest. Geoffrey, don't go before you hear me. I don't know if what I think matters to you now, but I hope it does. You can still make me think of you without shrinking, if you will.
What is it you are asking of me?
To make amends, Geoffrey.
You poor little innocent.
I'm poor enough, but I'm not so innocent. But what I know, you must right that old wrong now if you're ever to get it right.
You aren't insane enough to think I would turn around in these few hours and go back to something that 10 years ago was ended forever. Why, it's stark-staring madness.
No. What you did 10 years ago, that was mad. This is paying a debt.
Look at Jean, you're dreadfully wrought up and excited. Tired, too.
No. No, not tired. Though I've traveled so far today. I know you smile at certain conversations. You think they're hysterical. Worse, vulgar. But people must get their revelation how they can. And Geoffrey, if I can't make you see this one of mine, I shall know your love could never mean strength to me, only weakness, and I shall be afraid. So afraid I'd never dare to give you the chance of making me loathe myself. I shall never see you again.
Right, I was afraid that vein of fanaticism in you.
Certainly you couldn't make a greater mistake than to go away now and think it any good to ever come back. Even if I came to feel different, I couldn't do anything different. I should know all this couldn't be forgotten. I should know that it would poison my life in the end, yours too.
She has made good use of her time. What has changed her? Has she been seeing visions too?
What do you mean?
Why is she intriguing to get hold of a man that 10 years ago she flatly refused to see or hold any communication with?
Intriguing to get hold of? She hasn't mentioned you.
What? Then how in the name of heaven do you... that she wants to... what you ask?
There can't be any doubt about that.
Oh, you're so ridiculous, child. And this is all just your unaided invention. Oh, I could thank God. Oh.
For what are you thanking God?
Suppose. I'm not going to risk it, but suppose. Whether I deserve to suffer or not, it's quite certain you don't. Don't cry, dear one. It was never the real thing. I had to wait till I knew you before I understood.
Oh, is that true? Loving you has made things clear to me I didn't dream before. If I could think that because of me you were able to do this.
Look here, do you seriously ask me to give up the girl I love, to go and offer to marry a woman I don't even think of?
You cared for her once. You'll care about her again. She's beautiful and brilliant. Everything. I've heard she can win any man she sets herself to.
She's bewitched you.
Jeffrey, you aren't going away like that. This isn't the end.
I suppose even if she refused me, you'd...
She won't refuse you.
She did once.
She didn't refuse to marry you.
Wait, Lady John is waiting all this while for the car to go back with a message.
It's not a matter of life and death.
All the same, I'll go down and give the order.
Very well. You'll come back if you're the man I pray you are.
Dearest of all the world.
What is the matter?
I've been seeing Jeffrey.
Is this the effect seeing Jeffrey has?
You see, I know now how he spoiled someone else's life.
Who tells you that?
Several people have told me.
Well, you should be very careful how you believe what you hear.
You know it's true.
I know that it's possible to be mistaken.
I see, you're trying to shield him.
Why should I? What is it to me?
Oh, how you must love him.
Listen to me.
What's the use of your going on denying it? Jeffrey doesn't. Oh, don't look like that. I shall bring him to you.
You would be impertinent if you weren't a romantic child. You can't bring him back.
Yes.
But there's something you can do.
What?
Bring him to the point where he recognizes that he's in our debt.
In our debt?
In debt to women. He cannot repay the one he robbed.
Yes. Yes.
No, he can't repay the dead. But there are the living. There are the thousands with hope still in their hearts and youth in their blood. Let him help them. Let him be a friend to women.
Yes, I understand. That too. Thank you.
Well, you rather gave us the slip. VIDA, I believe Mr. Stoner wants to see you for a few minutes, but I'd like a word with you first, as I must get back. Do you think the car... Your man said something about recharging.
Oh, did he? Well, I'll see about that.
Mr. Trent has called, miss, to take Miss Levering to the meeting.
Bring Mr. Trent into my sitting room. I'll tell him you can't go tonight.
I know, my dear, you are not aware that what that impulsive girl wants to insist on.
I'm aware of it, yes.
But it isn't with your sanction, surely, that she goes on making this extraordinary demand.
I didn't sanction it at first, but I've been thinking it over.
Then all I can say is I'm greatly disappointed in you. You threw this man over years ago for reasons, whatever they were, that seemed to you good and sufficient. And now you come between him and a younger woman, just to play nemesis so far as I can make out.
Is that what he says?
He says nothing that isn't fair and considerate.
I can see he's changed.
And you're unchanged, is that it?
I've changed even more than he.
But... you care about him still, VIDA?
No.
I see. It's just that you wish to marry somebody.
Oh, Lady John! There are no men listening.
No, I didn't suppose there were.
Then why keep up that old pretense?
What
That to marry at all costs is every woman's dearest ambition till the grave closes over her. You and I know it isn't true.
Well, but... Oh, it was just the unexpected sight of him bringing it back. That was what fired you this afternoon. Of course, the memory of a thing like that can never die, can never be dimmed for the woman.
I mean her to think so.
Jean. And it isn't so.
You don't seriously believe a woman with anything else to think about comes to the end of 10 years still absorbed in a memory of that sort?
You've got to get over it then.
If the newspapers didn't remind me, I shouldn't remember once a 12-month that there was ever such a person as Geoffrey Stoner in the world.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yes, I'm glad too.
And if Geoffrey Stoner offered you what's called reparation, you'd refuse it?
Geoffrey Stoner? For me, he's simply one of the far-back links in a chain of evidence. It's certain I think 100 times of other women's present unhappiness to once that I remember that old unhappiness of mine that's past. I think of the nail and chain makers of Cradley Heath, the sweated girls of the slums. I think of the army of ill-used women whose very existence I mustn't mention.
Then why in heaven's name do you let poor Jean imagine?
Look, I'll trust you, Lady John. I don't suffer from that old wrong as Jean thinks I do, but I shall coin her sympathy into gold for a greater cause than mine.
I don't understand you.
Jean isn't old enough to be able to care as much about a principle as about a person. But if my half-forgotten pain can turn her generosity into the common treasury...
What do you propose she do, poor child?
Use her hold over Geoffrey Stoner to make him help us.
Help you?
The man who served one woman, God knows how many more, very ill, shall serve hundreds of thousands well. Geoffrey Stoner shall make it harder for his son, harder still for his grandson, to treat any woman as he treated me.
How will he do that?
By putting an end to the helplessness of women.
You must think he has a great deal of power.
Power? Yes! Men have too much over penniless and frightened women.
What nonsense! You talk as though women hadn't their share of human nature. We aren't made of ice any more than the men.
No, but all the same, we have more self-control.
Than men?
You know we have.
I know we mustn't admit it.
For fear they'd call us fishes.
They talk of our lack of self-control, but it's the last thing they want women to have.
Oh, we know what they want us to have, so we make shift to have it. If we don't, we go without hope. Sometimes we go without bread.
VIDA, do you mean to say that you...
I mean to say that men's vanity won't let them see it, but the thing's largely a question of economics.
You never loved him then.
Oh, yes. I loved him. Once. It was my helplessness turned the best thing life can bring into a curse for both of us.
I don't understand you.
Oh, being understood, that's too much to expect. When people come to know I've joined the union...
But you won't.
Who is there who will resist the temptation to say, "Poor Vida Levering, what a pity she hasn't got a husband and a baby to keep her quiet." The few who know about me, they'll be equally sure that it's not the larger view of life I've gained. My own poor little story is responsible for my new departure. My best friend, she will be surest of all that it's a private sense of loss, or lower yet, a grudge. But I tell you, the only difference between me and thousands of women with husbands and babies is that I am free to say what I think. They aren't.
I must get back. My poor ill-used guest.
I won't ring. I think you'll find Mr. Stoner downstairs waiting for you.
Oh, he will have left word about the car in any case.
Well, Mr. Trent, I didn't expect to see you this evening.
Why not? Have I ever failed?
Lady John, this is one of our allies. He is good enough to squire me through the rabble from time to time.
Well, I think it's very handsome of you, after what she said today about men.
I've no great opinion of most men myself, I might add, or of most women.
Oh, well, at any rate, I shall go away relieved to think that Miss Levering's plain speaking hasn't alienated all masculine regard.
Why should it?
That's right, Mr. Trent. Don't believe all she says in the heat of propaganda.
Oh, I do believe all that she says, but I'm not cast down.
Not when she says...
Was there ever a misogynist of my sex who ended by deciding to make an exception?
Oh, if that's what you build on.
Oh, well, why shouldn't a man-hater on your side prove equally open to reason?
That part of the question doesn't concern me. I've come to a place where I realize that the first battles of this new campaign must be fought by women alone. The only effective help men could give, amendment of the law, they refuse. The rest is nothing.
Don't be ungrateful, VIDA. Here's Mr. Trent ready to face criticism and publicly championing you.
It's an illusion that I, as an individual, need Mr. Trent. I'm quite safe in the crowd. Please, don't wait for me, and don't come for me again.
Of course, if you'd rather...
And that reminds me, I was asked to thank you, and to tell you too that they, the women of the Union, they won't need your chairmanship anymore. Though that, I beg you to believe, has nothing to do with any feeling of mine.
Of course. I know there must be other men ready, better known men.
It isn't that. It's simply that they find a man can't keep a rowdy meeting in order as well as a woman.
You aren't serious.
Mr. Trent, haven't you noticed that all their worst disturbances come when men are in charge?
Well, I hadn't connected the two ideas. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
That nice boy's in love with you. I wish you hadn't been so unkind to that nice boy.
Do you?
Yes, for then I would be more certain of your telling Geoffrey Stoner that intelligent women don't nurse their wrongs and lie in wait to punish them.
You are not certain?
Are you?
Well, have they primed you? Have you got your lesson by heart at last?
I'm not sure I understand you. However, unproprietous your mood may be, I shall discharge my errand. I've promised to offer you what I believe is called amends.
You've come to realize then after all these years that you owed me something?
I'm not here to deny it.
Pay then. Pay!
I've promised that. If you exact it, I will.
Ah, if I insist you'll make it all good. Then don't you know you must pay me in kind?
What do you mean?
Give me back what you took from me. My old faith, give me that.
If you mean to make phrases...
Oh, give me back mere kindness, or even tolerance. Oh, I don't mean your tolerance. Give me back the power to think fairly of my brothers, not as mockers, thieves.
I've not mocked you, and I've asked you.
Something you knew I should refuse. Or did you dare to be afraid I wouldn't?
I suppose if we set our teeth, we could...
I couldn't! Not even if I set my teeth. And you wouldn't dream of asking me if you thought there was the smallest chance.
I can do no more than make you an offer of reparation that is as is in my power. If you don't accept it...
Accept it? No! Go away and live in debt. Pay and pay and pay! And find yourself still in debt for a thing you'll never be able to give me back. And when you come to die, say to yourself, I paid all creditors but one.
Rather tidy know of this talk of debt. If I hear that you persist in it, I shall have to...
What?
No, I'll keep to my resolution.
What resolution?
I came here under considerable pressure to speak of the future, not to reopen the past.
The future and the past are one.
You talk as if that old madness was mine alone, and it is the woman's way.
I know. And it's not fair. Men suffer as well as we by the woman's starting wrong. We are taught to think the man a sort of demigod. If he tells her, go down into hell she goes.
Make no mistake, but the woman alone, not the woman alone, they go down together.
Yes, they go down together, but the man comes up alone, as a rule. It is more convenient, so for him and for the other woman.
My conscience is clear. You know, and I know, and so do you, that most men in my position wouldn't have troubled themselves. I gave myself endless trouble.
So you've gone about all these years feeling that you'd discharged every obligation?
Not only that, I stood by you with a fidelity that was nothing short of quixotic. If, woman-like, you must recall the past, I insist you on recalling it correctly.
You think I don't recall it correctly?
Not when you make other people believe that I deserted you. It's curious enough charge when you stop to consider how...
Well, when we do, just for 5 minutes out of 10 years, when we do stop to consider...
Remember, it was you who did the deserting. Since you had to rake the story up, you might as well have the fairness to tell the facts.
You think the facts would have excused you?
No doubt you've forgotten them, since Lady John tells me you wouldn't remember my existence once a year if the newspapers...
You minded that.
I minded you giving false impressions. Do you deny that you returned my letters unopened?
No.
Do you deny that you refused to see me, and that, when I persisted, you vanished?
I don't deny any of those things.
I had no trace of you for years.
I suppose not.
Very well, then. What could I do?
Nothing. It was too late to do anything.
It wasn't too late. You knew, since you read the papers, that my father died that same year. There's no longer any barrier between us.
Oh, yes? There was a barrier?
Of your own making, then.
I had my guilty share in it. But the barrier was your invention.
It was no invention. If you had ever known my father...
Oh, the echoes. How often you used to say, if I knew your father, but you said too. You called the greatest barrier by another name.
What name?
The child that was yet to come.
That was before my father died. I still hoped to get his consent.
How the thought of that all-powerful personage used to terrorize me. What chance had a little unborn child against the last of the great feudal lords, as you called him?
You know the child would have stood between you and me.
I know! The child did stand between you and me!
It did stand.
Happy mothers teach their children. Mine had to teach me.
You talk as if...
Teach me that a woman may do a thing for love's sake that shall kill love.
Silly made it plain that you had no love for me.
I had need of all of it for the child.
You mean that then, after all, it lived?
No. I mean that it was sacrificed. But it showed me no barrier is so impassable as the one a little child can raise.
Is that why you... Is that why?
Day and night, there it was. Between my thought of you and me. When I was most unhappy, I would wake thinking I heard it cry. It was my own crying I heard. But I seemed to have it in my arms. I suppose I was mad. I used to lie there in that lonely farmhouse, pretending to hush it. It was so I hushed myself.
I never knew.
I didn't blame you. You couldn't risk being with me.
Agree that for both our sakes...
Yes, you had to be very circumspect. You were so well known. Your aristocratic father, your brilliant political future.
In fact, our future as I saw it then.
Yes, it all hung on concealment. It must have looked quite simple to you. You didn't know that the ghost of a child that had never seen the light, the frail thing you meant to sweep aside and forget, have swept aside and forgotten. You didn't know it was strong enough to push you out of my life. It can do more. It can push that girl out. It can do more still.
Are you threatening me?
No, I am preparing you.
For what?
For the work that must be done. Either with your help or that girl's. One of two things. Either her life and all she has given to this new service, or a ransom. If I give her up to you.
I see. A price? Well...
Even if I could trust you to pay, no, it would be a poor bargain to give her up for anything you could do.
In spite of your assumption, she may not be your tool.
You are horribly afraid she is. But you are wrong. Don't think it's merely I that have got hold of Jean Dumbarton.
Who else?
The new spirit that's abroad. How else should that inexperienced girl have felt the new loyalty and responded as she did?
New indeed, however little loyal.
Loyal above all. But no newer than electricity was when it first lit up the world. It had been there since the world began, waiting to do away with the dark. So has the thing you're fighting.
The thing I'm fighting is nothing more than one person's hold on a highly sensitive imagination. I consented to this interview with the hope... It only remains me to show her your true motive is revenge.
Once, say that to her, and you are lost. I know what it is that men fear. It even seems as if it must be through fear that your enlightenment will come. That is why I see value in Jean Dumbarton far beyond her fortune. More than any girl I know, if I keep her from you, that gentle, inflexible creature could rouse in men the old half-superstitious fear.
Fear, I believe you're mad.
Mad. Unsexed. These are the words today. In the Middle Ages, men cried out, "Witch!" and burnt her. The woman who served no man's bed or board.
You want me to make that poor child believe that...
She sees for herself. We've come to a place where we find there's a value in women apart from the value men see in them. You teach us not to look to you for some of the things we need most. If women must be freed by women. We have need of such as... Who knows? She may be the new Joan of Arc.
That she should be the sacrifice.
You have taught us to look very calmly on the sacrifice of women. Men tell us in every tongue it's a necessary evil. One girl's happiness against a thing nobler than happiness for thousands? Who can hesitate? Not Jean.
Good God, can't you see that this crazed campaign you'd start her on, even if it's a success, it can only be through the help of men? What excuse shall you make for your own soul for not going straight to the goal?
You think we wouldn't be glad to go straight to the goal?
I do. I see you'd rather punish me and see her revel in a morbid self-sacrifice.
You say I want to punish you only because, like most men, you won't take the trouble to understand what we do want, or how determined we are to have it. You can't kill this new spirit among women. And you couldn't make a greater mistake than to think it finds a home only in the exceptional or the unhappy. It's so strange, Geoffrey, to see a man like you as much deluded as the Hyde Park loafers who say to Ernestine Blunt, "Who's hurt your feelings?" Why not realize this is a thing that goes deeper than personal experience? If you take only the narrowest personal view, a good deal depends on what you and I agree upon in the next 5 minutes.
You recommend my realizing the larger issues, but in your ambition to attach that girl to the chariot wheels of progress, you quite ignore the fact that people fitter for such work, the men you look to enlist in the end, are ready, waiting to give the thing a chance.
Men are ready! What men?
Women have themselves to blame that the question has grown so delicate that responsible people shrink, for the moment, from being implicated in it.
We have seen the shrinking.
Without quoting anyone else, I might point out that the new antagonism seems to have blinded you to the fact that I, for one, am not your opponent.
This phrase has a familiar ring. We have heard it from 420 others.
I spoke, if I may say so, of someone who would count. Someone who can carry his party along with him, or risk a seat in the cabinet.
Did you mean you are ready to do that?
An hour ago I was.
An hour ago.
Exactly. You don't understand men. They can be led. They can't be driven. 10 minutes before you came into the room, I was ready to say I would throw in with the political lot with this reform.
And now?
Now you block my way with an attempt at coercion. By forcing my hand, you give my adherents an air of bargain driving for a personal end, exacting the mistake of the ignorant agitators of your union, as you call it. You have a great deal to learn. This movement will go forward, not because of the agitation, but in spite of it. There are men in Parliament who would have been actively serving the reform today as actively so vast a constitutional change.
And they haven't done it because...
Because it would put a premium on breaches of public behaviour. Decent behaviour. Look here.
This is very good. I only have one objection.
Objection.
You haven't sent it.
That is your fault.
When did you write this?
Just before you came in, when...
It must have pleased Jean, that message. I could drive a hard and fast bargain with you, but I think I won't. If both love and ambition urge you on, perhaps. After all, life hasn't been quite fair to you. You fall out of one ardent woman's dreams into another's.
May as well tell me. Do you mean to...
Keep you apart and her apart? No.
What can I do for you? For the real you, not the reformer or the whippy politician. For the woman I so unwillingly hurt. You may not believe it, but now that I understand, there's almost nothing I wouldn't do to right that old wrong.
There's nothing to be done. You can never give me back my child.
Will that ghost give you no rest?
Yes. Oh, yes. I see life is nobler than I know. There is work to do.
Why should you think that only you these 10 years have taught something to? Why not give even a man credit for the willingness to learn something of life and for being sorry, profoundly sorry, for the pain his instruction has cost others? You seem to think I've taken it all so lightly. That's not fair. All my life, ever since you disappeared, the thought of you has hurt. I would give anything I possess to know you were happy again.
Happiness.
Why shouldn't you find it still?
I see. She couldn't help telling you about Mr. Alan Trent. Lady John couldn't.
Well, the people the years have not taken from, not given more, but given to you more than ever. You haven't lost your beauty.
Gods saw it was so little effectual, it wasn't worth taking away. One woman's mishap. What is that? A thing as trivial to the great world as it's sordid in most eyes. But the time has come when a woman may look about her and say, what general significance has my secret pain? Does it join on to anything? And I find it does. I'm no longer merely a woman who has stumbled on the way. I'm one who has got up, bruised and bleeding, wiped the dust from her hands and the tears from her face, and said to herself, not merely, here's one luckless woman, but here is a stone of tumbling to many. Let's see if it can be moved out of other women's way. And she calls people to come and help. No mortal man, let alone a woman by herself, can move that rock of offense. But if many help, Geoffrey, the thing can be done.
Lord, how you care.
Don't be so sad. Shall I tell you a secret? Jean's ardent dreams needn't frighten you. If she has a child, that from the beginning, it was not the strong arm, it was the weakest. The little arms that subdued the fiercest of us. You will have other children, Geoffrey. For me, there was only to be one. Well, since men alone have tried and failed to make a decent world for the little children to live in, it's as well some of us are childless. Yes, we are the ones who have no excuse for standing aloof from the fight.
VIDA.
What?
You've forgotten something. A telegram. It would be a shame if Someone leaked it early.